September 18th, 2024. Alphabetical roll call, please.
Clark Brewer here.
Tom Callahan here.
Amy Glassmeyer here.
Kevin Hine here.
Deirdre Hobson here. David Station.
You're here too. Okay.
Sorry.
All right. So our first order of business is the continued public hearing, since we did open it without any discussion a couple of weeks ago. Continued public hearing for a site plan review for 82 Border Street. Who do we have here for that?
You have Attorney Brodsky coming in, and I'm also going to pull in members of his team as well.
Please. Uh-oh. Where is it?
Chair Callahan, good evening. It's Adam Brodsky.
Yeah.
Yeah, could you
Hold on.
please promote?
Hold on one second, if you don't mind. I lost, where is it? Oh, there it is. I can't. I'm looking to share a screen, but I can't seem to share. But, oh, well. Can anybody see that?
Yes, we can see
Oh,
that.
Okay. All right, I just want to say to the public and to the board before we go, we start tonight that what we're doing here is called a site plan review. It's under section 12.7 of our zoning bylaw. This project is going through permitting with the zoning board for a special permit. That's probably one of the most significant ones locally. They're in the middle of their hearing process. They have a meeting in their they're hearing this again on the first meeting in October for their board, which is what, October, it's a Tuesday, right? I think the first Tuesday in October.
Yes, it's October 1st.
Okay. And then Conservation Commission will also be permitting this. And have they started yet?
I believe they are hearing this tomorrow evening.
Right.
And then finally, I believe this project will have to go through the state's Chapter 91 licensing process. So I just want to make sure everybody in the public knows that there are plenty of opportunities to be heard on this, and each board has differing jurisdictions. Ours is somewhat limited to what's here in subsection F. And I just want to caution everybody to stay focused on what actually we are here to be doing, with the permit that we're giving here, and we're not making decisions tonight about matters that are under other boards' jurisdictions. So I just want everybody to stay focused on what the law actually requires us. Members of the public can open up this bylaw by going to the Cohasset E360 site. And then under chapter 300 is the zoning bylaw, and then section 12.7. Members of the public, if you do want to be heard, we will first hear from the applicant, give an overview of the project. We will hear from our peer reviewer, whether they're here or not. They have submitted a letter, and there's a whole section that relates to our jurisdiction. Then we will hear from members of the board and then members of the public. If you want to be promoted on screen, raise your hand, and that will be done. Otherwise, there's a Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and you can ask a written question that we will address as we go along. So, without further ado, Adam, if you want to begin.
Thank you, Chair Callahan. Good evening, everyone. As you know, my name is Adam Brodsky. I'm a local land use and environmental lawyer, and I represent the applicant Co-Lobster LLC, which owns the former Mill River Boatyard at 82 Border Street. Tom Sullivan is the manager of the LLC. We have with us tonight Eamon O'Mara, who is our project manager, Susan Hoadley and Corinna Martinez, the project architects with HMA, Deborah Keller, our professional engineer with Merrill, And we do have in the audience, if available, Nino DeNuno from DeNuno Construction, who is the going to be, hopefully, the general contractor. And again, I'll be brief, provide an overview, and then I'd like to hand this presentation over to Eamon to describe the project objectives. Then Susan and Corinna have a slide deck available for presentation to describe the overall project with an emphasis on architecture and how the project fits in with the community. As just a cautionary note, we did provide some renderings, and this was an issue of somewhat confusion in front of the zoning board. The renderings are not exact duplicates of either the site plans or the architectural plans. They're just intended to give a general sense of the architecture. So I just wanted to make that clear early on, and then we'll turn the presentation over to Deborah to speak to the site plans and the engineering aspects of the project. You're familiar with the site. It's a historic boatyard with 4 buildings. The site is located within the waterfront business zoning district, as well as various FEMA flood zones and the town floodplain and watershed protection district. The existing buildings are non-compliant, both with respect to certain zoning requirements, as well as the flood resistant construction requirements of the state building code. Briefly, we're proposing, as you know, to change the use of this property to a small boutique hotel. And as Chair Callahan alluded, we've submitted a petition to the Zoning Board of Appeals for various special permits, one of which is to authorize the use as a small boutique hotel under transient lodging. The hotel will have a total of 8 rooms, which require 8 parking spaces under the Cohasset zoning code. We're providing a total of 9 parking spaces because we're going to have 1 full-time manager to run the hotel. The existing large metal boat storage building, which you're familiar with, is going to be raised and reconstructed in a much smaller footprint further from the shoreline. That new structure will conform in all respects with the zoning code, as well as the building code for flood resistant construction, and will be elevated with 1 hotel room above and 3 parking spaces below. This change affords us the opportunity to open up the site for public access along the shoreline, which presently does not exist. And we're proposing a public access way similar to the new Captain's Walk that recently opened, the condominium project on Elm Street. The existing gatehouse building, what we call the gatehouse building, and Susan Corinna will describe these buildings in more detail, is the small building right on Border Street, adjacent to the way. And we're proposing to renovate that with a small addition that will be used for the manager of the facility. That work is not going to result in a substantial improvement under the building code, therefore it doesn't have to be made flood compliant. Nonetheless, we're actually adding flood vents to improve the flood resiliency of that structure. And then the 2 remaining buildings, the large buildings presently on piles, we describe them as the Main Inn and the Eastwick Inn building. I understand that the Witches of Eastwick was filmed in the Eastwick building, and hence the name. And the decks associated with those buildings are going to be all elevated in place. There are going to be no exterior changes. They're simply going to be elevated so that those buildings are above the design flood elevation. And that's where we're going to locate the majority, the remaining hotel rooms. This site is obviously prone to flooding, and to mitigate flooding and also to elevate the parking and access to provide better access from Border Street. We're proposing to construct a small retaining wall that's parallel to the existing bulkhead and fill a portion of the property. So we're actually elevating portions of the land, again, for flood resiliency and to improve access in and out of the site. There's presently a marine railway that will be, it's abandoned, hasn't been used in years. That's going to be removed. would be filling a portion of the railway pit and repairing the existing bulkhead. As you know, the entire property is paved and redeveloped, but this project is going to reduce ground area coverage by approximately 2,133 square feet. And as Chair Callahan noticed, the project requires an order of conditions, and we're presently going to present to the Conservation Commission tomorrow evening. Again, the Zoning Board of Appeals, we opened that hearing on September 10th. That's continued to October 1. And Chair Callahan is correct. We have a variety of existing Chapter 91 licenses for this property. We're going to be required to either amend those licenses or there'll be a new license issued to approve these activities. We were able to get Weston and Sampson's peer review comments dated September 16, 2024. We look forward to hearing from them directly. We're actively working on preparing those responses. We're not in a position tonight to respond, but we will present that to the planning board in the future. I do ask for permission to have Merrill speak directly with Weston and Sampson so they can attempt to work out any outstanding issues, so that when we're next before the planning board, hopefully we will have all of the technical comments resolved. So that went on a little bit longer than anticipated, but I'm going to turn this over to Eamon, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Good evening. My name is Eamon O'Mara, and it's great to be back working with you. The planning board, and together with the community, we successfully put together the Cohasset Wharf project, and I think that was a great example of working together. That was a complicated project, and the results are actually really quite beautiful right now. If you want to, head over there and have a look at what the work that we did together there and the results that are ongoing. This project is equally, challenging. And, before I hand it off to the team, I just want to let you know that we spent the better part of 3 years planning this particular project. There are many layers to this site, and we think we've elegantly, developed a solution for the property. And Susan and Karina will give you those details, but we look forward to working with you and the community to sort of sort through all those. The main objectives with the property really were, and with the project, are primarily, number one, accessibility, improved accessibility with the Captain's Walk. And you'll see that, and safety. We think there's some real opportunities here. So you'll see that in the planning. And as Adam mentioned, sustainability. There's some issues with the property, and our solutions, address those. And then really finally is adding attractive lodging to Cohasset. So we've worked well together with the planning board before. This property is a continuation of Tom Sullivan's ownership and his vision for the harbor. This is a complementary use to Cohasset Wharf. And again, I think what you'll see in the presentation is an elegant solution to what is a really complicated site that includes both VE and AE zones. And there's a lot of layers in the underlying planning. And that's really what took us the 3 years to sort of assemble the solution. And again, the goals, as you'll see, they're kind of very, representative in the massing, is just this great improved accessibility and safety, and ultimately, a beautiful solution to the property. So we look forward to working with you to get the same results at Cohasset Wharf. And I'll hand it off to Karina and Susan to, I guess, present the project, and then we'll go on to Merrill. Thank you. Are you muted, Susan?
Of the board. I'm Susan Hoadley, and I'm here with Karina Martinez. Together we're Hoadley Martinez Architects. And if everyone can look at the screen that's up right now, this is the cover of a sort of an executive summary booklet that we produced that we developed the format for on the other project for Cohasset Wharf. It has been printed in multiple copies and given to Cassandra, and also provided in PDF form so that all members of the board should be able to have a copy, a printed copy and a PDF. But the purpose of that document is really to boil this down. There's an awful lot of things going on here, and we think that we've found the solution to just about all of them. But in order to explain this and have it make sense to folks that are looking at it for the first time, I'd like to just go through the executive summary book, which should certainly bring up further questions, and introduce you to the project. The cover of the booklet is looks like this. It shows the rendering that appeared in the Patriot Ledger. And again, this is considered an artistic rendering that is just meant to give a feeling. Most of it is accurate, but there are places here and there where specific conditions have not been drawn in exact detail. The first page of the book shows the various conditions of this site throughout history. It is primarily an industrial site, which about 40 years ago was also the site of a movie set that was built for The Witches of Eastwick, and a couple of the iconic scenes in that movie were filmed here. So in order to figure out what's really appropriate for this site, and in the context of the other main buildings around it, which are new, so sorry about that. In context of the other main buildings around it, we have looked at other pieces of good architecture and in Cohasset Harbor that we decided to take as inspiration. They're numbered and keyed into the map that's shown at left. But a big inspiration for our project was the pool house at the Oaks, 7 Border Street, which has this very, very pale, almost imperceptibly colored stucco that just glows in that very, very special Western light that this site gets in on a sunset night. For the stucco, we've also looked at Boathouse of the Oaks, and we're going to propose it for the Eastwick Inn. The roofs, we took inspiration from the original Kimball's Lobster House, which was an iconic destination on the harbor. The engineer's shed, which is, I believe, the only federally, other than the oil shed on the sailing club site, federally protected building that is subject to very strict historic regulations. And the engineer's shed has a red roof, which is reminiscent of Coast Guard stations in New England. John Smith's Pavilion also has a red roof, as does the Bellarmine House Boat Pavilion, which is right in the channel. Okay, next. So here's the site as it exists now. You see the railway that cuts into the site that we intend to propose covering over. But what you see, and I'd like you to pay special attention to, are the names of the buildings. And Karina, if you could just mouse over them. The one that over to the left is called the Boathouse. Right now, it's just a big shed. The Gatehouse, which has an apartment in it right now, we are going to continue to call the Gatehouse. The main building is right here, and then what we're calling the Eastwick building, because that was the site of the famous scene in the movie, is right up front. But you can see there is a obstructed fence along Border Street. There are tricky traffic conditions, including a loading zone that is ostensibly in the street, and a couple of other pretty hazardous conditions. And so this is what we're proposing to speak about the architecture. We are thinking about using a sort of a post and beam wharf derived wood base, which can also help us resolve any flood venting that we may need to use as we go on with our permitting. On that first floor, we are actually, and Deb can go through this, but we will be proposing driving into a main driveway and through the boathouse in order to solve all the parking requirements that we will need to comply. So this drawing essentially shows the main points that Eamon hit on, which are the provision of a captain's walk going right along the water, a welcoming stair going up to the main entry of the inn. We are using very traditional gridded 6/6 windows. We are using a repurposed heritage window that belongs to the owner for this little rondel up in the pediment. And other than that, we're just trying to keep it very, very quiet, simple, and dignified. And here's the back. The boathouse is to the right. It's got elements that are, it's got the red roof that I spoke about and the timber, the timber expression on the first floor. We are going to likely have, as part of the inn provisions, some marine components, and those could be those would be associated with the boathouse itself. And then there is a hotel room on the second floor of that building. The lantern or cupola here is for light admission only. It's non-occupiable. And then over in the gatehouse, we are basically creating a more compliant shape by taking the stair that now basically dumps down onto the street, and we're taking it and we're flipping it inboard so that eases the zoning nonconformity and also brings the action and entry and exit up to the building outside of the street into the safer inner courtyard. On the Eastwick Inn itself, which is sort of the meant to be perceived as the welcoming, or sorry, the main building, meant to be the sort of the welcoming icon to the harbor itself. We would propose having doors that throw open to get the sea breezes into a reception area that's on the first floor of the inn. And then the big deck that results here, we are going to keep open and flexible. That's something that when the gate is open can be accessed right off of the captain's walk up the steps. Next. So basically, in a nutshell, we have the existing boathouse, the existing gatehouse, the existing main, and the existing Eastwick buildings as shown with these thick lines. And we are reducing the size of the boathouse. We are pulling it in closer into the site, and yet pulling it off of the water to give more public area. This pink line shows the accessible path of travel. Capital A, in other words, a wheelchair can wheel right up on into the inn and out into the handicap compliant room in the Eastwick building. We think that we worked really hard to make this site very accessible for all abilities, and we think that this works well. The orange area is a new 10-foot wide wood public access walkway that could potentially tie up formally with the Captain's Walk. The Captain's Walk signage has been programmed for this site, and I've had discussions with the Historical Commission about exactly where that would go. That is a sign that talks about the historic Doan Wharf that was the first development on this site. You want to chime in, Karina?
Oh, I just wanted to also note that as part of the proposed site improvements, we are planning to take all of the overhead wiring that spans the the length of the property, and they will be buried. And also removing the existing loading zone that's in Border Street, and potentially trying to work with the town to propose a new bike lane that could make for safe travel in front of the property here by eliminating that loading zone.
Especially since this is a kind of a critical leg on the journey from the sailing club to town that's taken by kids in the summer on bikes. And then you want to talk about well, I can go through this one. It's so if you start here, you see that the way to drive into this site is to drive onto the sort of shell driveway and on into the boathouse, where you get 4 additional parking places. And then on out to start your journey up Border Street, and an opening on the south of the building. There's new raised grade with a cobble apron around the building. We have gentle steps that lead up to the lobby of the main building right here. So the main building and its reception area have the view out to the harbor and the channel. There is a lounge with a flexible support space adjoining that. And then over in the Eastwick Inn, we have a large suite that will accommodate someone who is in a wheelchair. And then on the first floor of the gatehouse, we have our sprinkler room, maintenance, utility, and storage. Okay, next. The other thing I'd like to add that this plan shows is currently the floor plans of the main inn and the Eastwick Inn, the elevation heights vary between 8 feet in elevation and a little higher in the Eastwick Inn. And so we're proposing to raise these 2 buildings, including all of the wood decks, to be at elevation 12 for resiliency. And this complies with the current building code and FEMA requirements for the AE zone that we're currently in. The resultant raising will cause us to seek zoning relief, which we have already initiated. The existing gatehouse is not being raised. It's just staying in its footprint. Any additional things that we add to that existing gatehouse are compliant because they're outside of the setback. So we're not seeking zoning relief there. And the new building that we're proposing here is fully compliant per building code, Cohasset bylaws, and FEMA requirements. And through the rest of the booklet, we're basically showing the floor plans of all the buildings, the room schedules. Here, the elevations we've set up that show that up here is the existing elevation as it's compared to what we're proposing, which demonstrates that we're not really doing much other than reskinning these buildings. And moving a punched opening here and there.
And then, so I'll just go through these kind of quickly.
Okay.
Just because it's just existing proposed. Same here, we'll just go through these quickly. I want to just get to what the, so this was it for the booklet. This is the consolidation. What I'd like to do is maybe jump over to the larger format of our submission, which includes our materials and also the landscape submission. So we're just going to jump around a little bit if you don't mind, and let me know if you have any questions, but I'll let Susan talk about these materials that we're proposing.
Yeah, so all the roofs we're proposing to be a very, very traditional terracotta and slate red, evocative of the historic maritime and especially rescue and Coast Guard life-saving stations across New England. And of course, down the eastern seaboard. We're proposing stainless steel cable railing with a cross form for the railings. For the wood trim, we're looking at Douglas fir, perhaps cypress, and maybe poplar. Something that will age out to a beautiful silver that evokes a teak or an ipe. The wood overhead garage doors would be, or they're not overhead anymore, they're actually sliding, but we're hoping that those would be evocative of other doors that we have designed around town, including this one that's on Joy Place. We are looking at that wonderful neutral chenille stucco that you can view on Border Street across from the John Smith Pavilion. We are looking at ipe wood decking and cobble pavers with hidden drains.
And I just want to point out that all the materials that we're proposing above and below the base flood elevation, all are going to be flood and damage resistant with the 4 or 5 classification per FEMA charts, and also meet fire ratings that would be required given, especially at the gatehouse, which is required. And now I'm just going to jump to the landscape drawings.
Yeah, so this is actually, these were developed by, let's go.
Okay.
These were developed by Kara Lamb. Unfortunately, Kara's had a death in her immediate family, so I am taking over along with Deb to describe what she developed alongside of us. The orange represents what was likely an ipe decking, which would be the captain's walk. It's 10 feet wide. And then something very special, I think, is a set of steps that sort of takes the corner. Karina, could you run your mouse around along that? A set of steps that could just be a stopping place to sit and have lunch or pause and have a coffee or a drink when you're walking along the harbor, and just be able to sit and take in the view. And that would be something that would be considered an extension of the public way and open to the public. Anything that you see in green, we're pretty pleased about. It will be the introduction of green space with native planting beds. This is essentially in replacement of no green space on the site as it is now. We have our ADA parking right in front of the entry to the deck. And Karina, if you could put your mouse over the ramp to show how you come up and along and underneath some elements that come down and shine very subtle light onto that walkway. The deck that brings you into the hotel lobby continues around this veranda and on out to the open deck. We are looking at exploring doing an open to tidal rocks below look through, if only because this the site is so spectacular that being able to, well, the deck is pretty big and we wanted to break it up, and we thought that if we can find a spot that has interesting sort of marine habitat or growth or tidal action underneath, we would like to provide that as a way to continue to better understand the tidal way. The area here we think of it as sort of like a mews, MEWS. Those would be private spaces that would be accessible off of the main hotel rooms, but all the stuff could be taken in over the winter. We were looking at mobile planters that you see at places like Previtz over in Pembroke, or there's some in Derby Street that are really beautiful with grasses. Just something that can sort of bring a nice touch of green and something to soften that deck. We will also be giving the public something new, which is the ability to walk up these steps right here and look out over the tidal waterways here, which is currently not accessible to the public. So I think what we're providing is an extraordinary increase in what the public can do on the site and how they can enjoy every side of this incredible place. Next. Okay, and while we're on it, Karina, do you want to, well, I guess Deb will go over parking and parking counts. But here in Kara's drawings, we have grasses and ground cover with swamp oak and beach plum and other native plantings, all taken off of the resource list provided by Cohasset Conservation. There'll be trees on the site where presently there are none. Okay. And this is a lighting scheme that shows an effort being made to take as much lighting off of the building as possible and to put it in the ground so as not to create reflection in the water at night from all portions of the harbor, but to just give this place a soft and safe glow so that you can make your way around it safely and with good lines of sight, but that the place isn't lit up like a big iconic commercial development. Next. I'd like to hand it over to Deb. Okay.
Okay, good evening. My name is Deb Keller with Merrill Engineers and Land Surveyors, and I'll just share our civil set, which gets into the sort of the weeds or details of all the engineering. Again, as stated, I don't have much to add. Everybody took a lot of the information, but I'll go over it again. This is the existing site, just an aerial photo showing where the site is orientated to the north of Border Street. As stated, there are several resources on the site. So this is our existing conditions, sort of identifying those resources, floodplains, Chapter 91 resources. We have some wetland buffers to offsite resources as well shown on the site. You can see in gray behind some of the color are the 4 existing structures, as well as an included small shed that this shed will be removed. As noted, we are filling sort of the entryway to the marine rail lines here, only to a portion, just to clarify, our retaining wall here, holding back that fill, will be above mean high water, so we aren't encroaching into the waterways with that improvement. Erosion controls, so we're looking to abide by all erosion controls on for the site. This is a little bit easier to read and showing you the 4 structures, main structures on the site. Getting into more of the details, this is our site layout plan. As mentioned, the 2 inns and the surrounding main deck will be elevated by up to elevation 12 to meet flood compliance. Gatehouse will remain structure, but will be improved with flood vents for flood compliance. The new building, as it will have 3 parking spaces at grade, so it'll be sort of a drive-through garage with 1 hotel unit above. What you see sort of in a darker hatch that surrounds that new building is the cobble pavers that were previously discussed. And one of the things that we did from an engineering perspective was to look at the site from a conservative approach with respect to stormwater. And we're assuming that this would be impervious as well, although it is intended to be designed as a pervious, meaning allowing water to drain through it. So there is a little level of conservatism that we're trying to incorporate into the site. As mentioned, those a sort of a stepped wall here, which is for seating along the Captain's Walk, which is shown on ours in a grayer color tone. So that's the seating that was previously discussed. The green are the main landscaping areas that reduce the impervious coverage from the existing conditions. I think I'm going to zoom in a little bit on this site just to talk a little bit more about the parking and circulation. As mentioned, we're looking at a horseshoe driveway and intended to be a one-way driveway entering on this side where my cursor is, coming through and driving out, which results in driving through the open garage underneath the new building. What this allows for is helping in the ease of the surface parking to be able to back out and drive through rather than trying to back out as someone's moving in, just trying to streamline that traffic flow through the site. As mentioned, we are proposing to improve the sidewalk along the front or frontage of the site as you get up into, from the Captain's Walk across the frontage to the gatehouse. And that's sort of where we have to stop as it gets quite tight here. We are proposing to shift the crosswalk so that we can align it up with the cobble path and the site circulation. So just for reference, this box here is where the the crosswalk currently is. So we are shifting it 6 to 8 feet to just align that crosswalk, and would be providing ADA accessible ramps here. And that helps us so that that crosswalk is not conflicting with the 2 proposed driveways. As stated, there are 9 parking spaces proposed on site, 8 for the 8 units, 1 for the manager, on-site manager, as well as we pulled in the loading dock that is striped now on Border Street into the site here. The waste management would be stored in the gatehouse and would be taken out for waste pickup. And we are currently showing, it's hard to see, but there are bollards along the gatehouse since it is very close in proximity to Border Street, as well as bollards along the surface parking. As we are trying to make everything ADA compliant and as well as grading, allow the back portion to flow out to the site rather than towards Border Street. We're leaving this flush. So we're looking to use the bollards for safety purposes. I believe we spoke a little bit with the building department, and we'll be looking to maybe put some wheel stops on the 3 spaces that are within the garage, just so that we don't have anybody bumping into the wall of the structure. Let's see. And then as stated, I'm gonna quickly go through here. We have our grading plan. We are filling the main portion of the site that's being filled is what I'm circling now. which is going from approximately elevation 6.5 to 7, up to 9.4, I believe, at the highest, 9.3. That would be our high point as to what drains towards Border Street versus away into the harbor. And again, we're trying to direct most of that water to the pervious areas on the site, which would be the cobble and the larger landscape areas that you see here in green. And again, we can't, we're raising this up for accessibility so that we can access the main inns that are being raised for flood compliance. Also with consideration to tying into Border Street, because obviously we need to stay within relative elevation with Border Street. And then from the utilities perspective, as mentioned, all new services will be provided to all the structures, as well as the goal would be to work with the utility companies to put the overhead wires underground. And hopefully that helps with, the views within this area and driving along Border Street. I think I've touched upon everything. As Adam stated, we did receive the Weston & Sampson peer review, and we've been working to respond to and address those comments, and we'll be providing that to the planning board shortly.
Okay, thank you. All right, I appreciate we let that go a while and we got an overview of the full project, but again, I just like ask everybody to really focus on our areas of jurisdiction. I see we have Mr. Pimental from Weston & Sampson here, so I'm going to ask him to, if you can screen share the letter you sent to us. If not, I'll screen share it. And if you can, we just want to go to section 2, which are the site plan review issues, and just go over those if we could.
Okay. Again, my name is Miguel Pimentel with Weston & Sampson. And I actually had prepared a summary of all the items that needed actions. So the letter was quite long.
Again, but I'd appreciate focusing on just the site plan issues. If
Site plan review. Yeah, and I have some items. Site plan review. So I have some items here that we encountered that have action items. So the green area ratio is one of them. So I'm actually reading from a summarized of that. So I don't know if you want to share the whole document, but all the items that I'm skipping are found in compliance. So we didn't really comment anything negatively or that needed to be action taken.
Just for everybody's benefit, I have the relevant portion of Weston & Sampson's letter up on the screen.
Thanks. Thank you.
So at that, as I took from that, the applicant, make a note of that, you need to deal with the green area ratio.
Ratio, yeah, and that's the zoning bylaw indicates that the interior green space of a site must be 2%. The applicant should provide the value to confirm that the green area ratio meets the standard. I would like to add to that because we've been in communication. There was a note that they couldn't find where that was noted on the bylaws. And we actually tried to look for it today, and we weren't able to reach out to the landscape architect who made the comment. So we are actually trying to reach for that section of the bylaws and provide that info, or whatever comes out of that investigation. So I'm still noting it, but we need to find where that was noted from. The next item was parking, which is 2.1.2 in the document. The proposed 8-foot wide spaces do not conform to local requirements. So that was by measuring. Some of them were measured in the PDF, and some were actually already dimensioned, but some of them measure from anywhere from 8 feet to 9 feet. So they should all be 9 feet. The applicant should clarify it and adjust all the parkings accordingly. No parking.
I'll just say this, that I appreciate that this is a tight spot to get in all the required parking, but I do not believe, and Carolyn, correct me if I'm wrong, that this planning board has any power to waive that. That might be a variance request from the zoning board.
Yeah.
And Chair Callahan, we believe that all of the parking spaces are actually compliant with respect to the 8-foot spot. That's the handicap spot. It's actually 16 feet wide. The striped section is 8 feet. The unstriped section is 8 feet, which complies with state ADA requirements. But again, to your point, we're going to respond formally.
Yeah, all right.
But
Yeah,
thank you for highlighting that.
we're not gonna resolve these tonight, so.
Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
sounds good. Thanks. The next point on that regarding parking was no parking or loading access are allowed within 5 feet of the lot line. The applicant should clarify the setback of the loading zone and parking space number 9. So in that graphic, we bubbled both of those, the loading zone on the lower right corner and parking number 9, which is the one on the top left. These appear to be really close to the front property line or over that. So they compared now to a drawing that was shared earlier. I think they're actually outside of the property line. So for the setback. Then the next one is sidewalks, which is 2.13. The grade of the sidewalks along Border Street, it's unclear. The applicant should clarify the grading of the sidewalks and the ramp to ensure they meet ADA compliance. This includes 2 items, grading and utility plan. The applicant should provide additional spot elevation to confirm ADA compliance and ADA access. The accessible path wrapping through the site should be accessible with paving with detectable warning. So I saw some of those notes now, and I think you guys have been actually kind of catching up with a lot of that in the drawings. There's a lot of detail that probably doesn't get noted, and I'm sure it's going to make it to the final design, but we just wanted to note it. Next item was on-street parking. It is unclear if existing on-street parking is to remain, which possesses some safety hazard with vehicles getting in and out of the driveway. The applicant should clarify this on the plans. From some of the latest plans that I just saw on the screen too, I mean, some of these comments are now a little outdated. That's, to the current drawings that were just shared earlier. So I don't think now it's, you guys intend to have any on-street parking. It's obvious by the bicycle lane that you guys are providing and also moving out the loading zone inboard. So next item, it's site distances. Site distances showing intersection and stopping site distances from the proposed driveways are not shown on the plans. The applicant should provide distances diagram in conformance with the Mass DOT Project Development Design Guide and AASHTO, which is a policy of geometric design and highway and streets. That's just to make it safe. So make sure that when people are leaving from the driveways, you have good line of sight, especially if you had street parking, which in the responses will come whether that's the case or not. Materials, comments on that was that the plans are missing details on fencing, edging, pavers, and footings. This should be added to the plans. Next point is demolition and erosion. Let's see if that's probably down below. Yeah, there we go. Demolition and erosion. The applicant should consider detail 2 on drawing L8.0, erosion control barrier, and that should be considered for one that addresses submersion. So that detail was just a detail type detail, but it's using surface construction. So I don't know if you guys have looked into anything that provides protection for areas that are semi-submerged or submerged on the water. Site plan layout. The site plan requires more information, including wheel stops, which you guys went over some of that. Now with bollards that we hadn't seen before. That's to protect the buildings and planting. Infiltration tests on existing soil. trash and recycling, location and access, which was just pointed out too in the presentation. And notes to confirm compliance with town standards for street excavation and ADA requirements. And that's all for site. Then the next point is general stormwater comments. I don't know if you guys want to jump there. Let's stop for now. All right, I'll keep going. General stormwater comments. Total suspended solids removal. The amount of impervious surfaces is being reduced. And since this is a redevelopment project, this could be taken as a means of addressing this standard. The applicant should address any measures that were considered to further manage water quality from the property parking area and the feasibility for such measures. Protection of critical areas. It is unclear if the applicant has evaluated the site discharge and a criteria area, and we recommend an evaluation by the applicant to determine if additional stormwater management measures should be considered. Illicit discharge compliance. The board might also ask for the applicant about any illicit discharge to determine if if a compliance statement should be included in the submission. And lastly, on that section is the operation and maintenance plan. In light of all the previous comments, an operation and maintenance plan might be required at a later date.
Okay. All right, thank you. I guess the applicant, you're making notes of all this. We'll look forward to your response to that. All right, I'm next going to turn it over to the board. I'll start alphabetically with Mr. Brewer. And again, let's keep our, we know we're going to have another hearing. Let's keep our comments relatively focused. And Clark, you got the floor.
Yeah, so I would say that the applicant has done an excellent job with a complex site and keeping the essence of the integrity of the existing massing to the extent possible, while opening up the site for public use, which it really, in the past, it's been sort of hazardous public use. I've used the mast lift on the east side of the metal building once to pull mast out of my site, out of my boat, but it was pretty dicey back then, and so I think what having a safe and reasonably flexible public use of the site is quite generous, I think, of the developer and the design team for the public of Cohasset and beyond. Because it's over water, the erosion issues probably need some creative approach where you're putting like a trampoline type of screen during construction to keep materials from getting into the water. And I didn't see that detail, but I'll assume there'll be something like that as opposed to traditional waterfront or wetland adjacent sites that have hay bales and erosion fencing. You may need some creative approaches to erosion. In terms of the site circulation, again, the public accommodation is excellent. While the peer reviewer suggests that there may be some flexibility in terms of the 24-foot drive aisle, it seems to me that the applicant has tried very hard to have cars going in one way and cars coming out the other, and heading out so that it is as safe as a small site can possibly be. and to that extent, I think a certain amount of flexibility on the distance to the property line for parking as opposed to loading might make sense. I concur with Adam's comment, follow-up comment on the ADA parking spot. While ADA, the actual car spot is 8 feet and that's dimensioned on the plan, Adam points out that it's actually a 16-foot wide space. That's different than a local zoning requirement. So I would say the applicant has touched on all the issues in a thorough way. The materials are excellent choices and are robust and long lasting, and should protect the owner developer's investment. In terms of the use, I don't have any issue with the use. It is an allowed use by special permit of the ZBA. And I think that to the extent that it supports the work that's being proposed, it's all in all, I'd say it's an excellent project that I think that will only enhance the waterfront. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you, Clark.
Chair Callahan, Adam Brodsky, just a point of information. We developed a very specific erosion control plan that was submitted with the Conservation Commission notice of intent based upon all of the experience with 46 Border Street. We'll provide a copy of that to the planning board also. Thank you.
Thank you. Amy? Hello, Amy. She here? All right,
I don't have any comments at this point. I'm listening to everybody.
yeah, and neither do I, since I came before you in the alphabet. I don't have any either at this point, but like to hold my comments until I see the responses to Weston and Sampson's materials. All right, Kevin?
Couple questions, just based on what was presented throughout the presentation, and I appreciate the detail given during the presentation and the schematics. The first one is regarding that oval drive-through. Would that be open 24/7, or would there be garage doors that open and close that actually facilitate drive-through and closure when times would permit closure in that oval drive-through area? If you could provide a response with regard to that verbally, I'd appreciate that, just for my understanding now. That was my first question. The second question I had was regarding the Captain's Walk, that publicly accessible area, but that, if you could provide clarification, that would still be private property, and public access would be controlled. If you could speak to that, perhaps how it would be controlled if that is the case. And also, would that mean uses of that walkway would also be controlled, and how so? You know, one thing that occurs to me is it's a walkway along the water, and you know, people like to fish. So, you know, would that be a permitted use? Could that be incorporated, or is that something that you would not want to be incorporated, and how would that be permitted or not? And a third point I would just like some additional information on, and it was alluded to, relief was sought, and it wasn't clear to me what relief was sought for. I suspect it might have been the height of the buildings or not, but I will let the applicants answer that, based on the 12-foot elevation of the decking and the associated structures on that, from what sounds like are now in the area of 9-foot elevation. So those were 3 points that I would just like to get some further information out that could be provided now.
Sure.
But
Callahan,
before-
would
Yeah,
you like me to respond?
before you do that, Adam, I want to just ask Carolyn a quick question regarding Kevin's first comment. Is this a situation similar to the condos at the old hotel site where we would have a town easement over the walkway?
Well,
the easement that was required for 124 Elm Street was a product of a planning board special permit, as I recall.
Yeah.
I don't think a public easement is required, and I think that situation was a little bit different because we wanted to be able to have not just public access for walking and accessing the waterfront, but that there were certain views we wanted protected, and we also wanted that to become a public space that could be used for events. So I think that was why the easement situation was contemplated and required there.
Would the Chapter 91 process require that?
The Chapter 91 process requiring an easement, or the Chapter 91 process just requiring public access?
Well, how does I guess the question is, how does the Chapter 91 process guarantee the public access? Does it normally require an easement between community and property owner?
I will certainly defer to Attorney Brodsky's comments on this, but my understanding is that you don't necessarily have to have a public easement. That Chapter 91, part of the purpose of it is that there is a requirement to provide public access to, the harbor, that as a a natural resource. Looking at this plan too, in particular, where it is just a walkway, I don't foresee this as being a place where someone would necessarily say, gee, this would be a great place for, a wedding anniversary party or a birthday party or something like that. I just don't see the space being there.
Yeah.
Versus that's what the situation was at 124 Elm. We just had a larger area. Plus, you also had at 124 Elm, you had an additional area outside of the Chapter 91 license that I would say the applicant offered, but perhaps it was also something that the planning board required, be added to the public space. So an easement was necessary for that privately owned land outside of the Chapter 91 jurisdictional area.
Okay, thanks. I think, Kevin, these kinds of issues are how the walkway is used. You mentioned fishing, and I think these are better directed to the zoning board as something they might be able to fit in within their special permit, as we did with the hotel site. Anyway, all right, Adam, you wanted to answer Kevin's questions quickly. Go ahead quickly. Please.
Thank you, and I agree with town council. This public access way is required under Chapter 91 and will be a specific condition of any Chapter 91 license. So the state would enforce public access over this area under the Public Waterfront Act. I don't think there's any prohibition to fishing along a public access way under Chapter 91, so fishing would presumably be allowed. This is different than 134 Elm Street, which is essentially a public park. And I think the planning board's concerns were went far beyond, again, a 10-foot wide public access way. So it is going to be a state requirement of any Chapter 91 license that those public areas are going to be open to the public. Under Chapter 91, there are reasonable regulations for safety and whatnot. But the public access will be assured by state law. With respect to the zoning relief, the existing main inn building and Eastwick building are non-conforming with respect to building height. We're elevating them, which is an intensification of those non-conformities, which can be authorized by the Zoning Board of Appeals by special permit. And that was one of the specific requests that is presently before the zoning board. And I understand that the drive-through, I believe, will be closed at night, again, for public safety reasons. But again, that's separate and distinct from the public access way, which follows the shoreline around the site. And Eamon, do you have anything to add on that issue?
No, I think that's correct. There will be garage doors in the structure, and they'll open and close when accessed. But I think you're correct in that at night they will be closed.
All right. Next up was Deirdre.
Thank you. I do like the presentation that's been put before us. I just had a few quick questions that may not be directly site related. Number one, I noticed there's a pier off the boathouse. I'm just curious, it's not an existing pier currently into the harbor? That obviously would have to be something that would be cleared with both the harbor master, if I'm correct, as well as, not sure, Mr. Brodsky may be able to answer that for me. And I just had some issues. Number one, what exactly is the boathouse going to be used for? Is there potential for that to be a business at some point, like a kayaking business or some other kind of paddleboarding business? I'm just curious if that is possibly one of the ideas that is being thought of, but what the purpose of the boathouse is. And then with regard to the public access, I thank Mr. Brodsky for answering my question. That was going to be the next one. So just that was it. And I look forward to your responses to Sampson and Weston's letter.
Chair Callahan, can I respond briefly, please?
Yeah, briefly, please.
First, I did misspeak. I just don't want to give the impression that Elm Street is a public park. It's publicly accessible private land. That was my shorthand, but inaccurate description of exactly what happened there. I was just trying to draw a distinction. The pier is not being permitted as part of this project and will be separately permitted. It was simply shown on the renderings and some of the plans just to give context. And the proposed use of the boathouse is presently, we're seeking authorization for one hotel room in the boathouse and then parking below. And, you know, any change of use would have to be separately reviewed by the building department. And if it needed authorization, would need authorization by the appropriate board.
Okay, thank you.
Regarding the dock, I imagine everybody on the planning board saw the letter from Chief Quigley going, a request of his going back to 2020, at least to 2022, looking for private landowners along the harbor to perhaps volunteer space for the harbor master's boat. Apparently, notwithstanding the fact that the town owns and controls Government Island, the harbor master boat does not really have a fixed location to rest, and so sometimes gets blocked by the commercial fishing fleet. So that's clearly outside our jurisdiction. If the chief is listening, or perhaps we can respond to him, that's something I think the zoning board could take up as part of this special permit. But again, it's a unique request, and but I just noted that we received that letter. All right, Brigitte, do you have any questions, comments?
In general, I really like the project. I like the public access. I also like the stucco architecture, because we have a number of stucco houses in Cohasset, so it nicely fits with that. Just a tiny comment, and I don't know whether it's really pertinent and relevant here. Maybe my misunderstanding, but with respect to off-street parking, just so that we guarantee enough of off-street parking in between this project and what used to be, kind of the Atlantica, so that we have enough room for people to park that do not come from Cohasset and want to attend, go to the sailing club or go to the rowing club, and otherwise they wouldn't have anywhere to go. But that it may be, kind of, there may be enough room left for that. That's about it.
Okay. With respect to the street parking, I don't think there's a lot of street spaces right there, like where the Lobster Pound building is today. Maybe in front of the boat shack, there was some spaces there. I just would encourage you not to take away any parking spaces in the harbor area if it can be avoided on street. Spaces down there are at a premium and will be at a premium with all the redevelopment that's coming. So that's the only thought about that. All right, we'll turn it now to members of the public. If I'm gonna stop my screen share for a moment. See who we have out there. We have 9 other participants. If there's anybody who wishes to speak and be brought onto the screen, raise your hand. If you want to type in just a written question that we can answer, please do so. I don't see any hands up. I don't see that we have any questions either. But, this will be the opportunity for anybody in the public if they have a question relating to what you've heard tonight and as it impacts our jurisdictions. Okay, I see none. So we need to.
You just had someone raise a hand.
Oh, okay. All right. Someone named administrator. Okay. To promote that person. And to the person who's identified as administrator, please give us your name and address, and then you have the floor whenever you're ready. You're muted at the moment.
Okay, sorry about that. Hi, sorry about that. I am administrator usually in the daytime. This is Paul Tedeschi and Jill Tedeschi, 75 Border Street. We're directly across the street from the Lobster Pound. We've been in conversations with Eamon. He's been fantastic about sharing plans, and we're very supportive of the concept for what's going on. I guess we just want to reiterate our concern because we live and, you know, experience the way that that property set up now with trucks and cars coming in and out. And I know that a lot of discussion was on parking, and just want to reiterate, you know, the more parking, the better. I understand there's just a 1-for-1. Eamon was great about sharing the, you know, current bylaws, expectations, et cetera, for this type of project. And that's great. But the reality is, you know, a private inn, how do you limit parking space per unit with a visitor, someone working, coming in later? So I understand the current Lobster Pound / new boathouse would comprise an underground parking and 1 unit over it. I just wonder, and it sounds like, you know, because it's got other uses, would there be more parking available if that didn't happen? So I just want to make sure from that perspective, you know, heavy consideration goes into parking both for visitors and users.
And also, Eamon had mentioned that, you know, as far as the parking, I think one of our major concerns has to do with flooding. And I know Eamon had mentioned that they're dealing with the wall being a little bit higher. Not sure if the grade is going to be changed, but I know we've allowed Tommy at the Lobster Pound to park his trucks at our house during those high tides. And so one of our concerns is really what's going to happen to those cars. And we all know there's those high moon tides where the water even comes up over the street. So where do those cars go? I think that's one of our main concerns. And I'm really not sure if this is more planning or zoning. I know we've spoken to Eamon, and we totally appreciate, you know, the stucco aspect of the build. I mean, we've done some builds. I do interior design and some architecture, and we're just not quite sure of the sort of European look to, you know, the yellow with green shutters and red roof to sort of the harbor look. You know, Eamon sort of spoke about, I think it was yacht. What is it?
Boston Yacht Haven.
Boston Yacht Haven, and said we're sort of tailoring ourselves, you know, to that kind of concept. And we looked it up, and it's absolutely beautiful. It looks very New England. It sort of, you know, is a little bit understated. You know, this is basically, this location, as we all know, is the very end of the channel. It's where people, you know, when they're boating or coming in and sort of looking, you know, at this building. I mean, and we're just sort of, you know, wondering, and we understand, I mean, we love stucco too. And it's not about the stucco, you know, as much as just sort of the
The fit and
Um,
feel within the harbor.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
so we'll leave it at that. We're very supportive of the concept and the project and hope it can move, but we just, like I said, move on, but just have concerns about the parking, knowing it's kind of a tight lot and there's impact, from storms, et cetera, and then just the physical aspect of the finish of the building. So
Yeah,
thank you for
Yeah.
allowing the conversation.
I appreciate your comments. Let's be honest about the parking. There isn't a lot of parking down here. The applicant is going to have to solve some of these problems in, emergency flood situations and
Mhm.
the applicant in getting its permit for the Atlantica site came up with a solution to deal with overflow parking and employee parking. It is relatively short term. They're basically leasing the parking lot from a private party. But, they're gonna have to accommodate it somehow, some way, and without imposing on all of you neighbors. If you want to volunteer your driveway to some people, go ahead, but again, the applicant's gonna have to solve these problems when they present themselves, if the floods get to that point. But Adam, if you could make a note to address those points the next time we come around. As far as the design goes, there are some harbor and village design guidelines that exist that the planning board passed a few years ago. It's not for us in our site plan review to deal with that. It's, as you're looking at the criteria that's on the screen, it doesn't deal with the architecture. I certainly think the zoning board could deal with it. And I would say to Susan, I mean, years and years ago, when all these properties are under common ownership, they all got painted black and gray, Nantucket looking, and people went nuts about the uniformity. I think taste is in the minds of, the eyes of the beholder, but I think there ought to be some adherence to the village and harbor design guidelines that this board worked very hard to put together. And I appreciate having variety and something a little new and different for Cohasset, but we did create guidelines to create a certain type of New England appropriate look for both the village and the harbor that I hope you take a look at and can address the next time we get together. All right, seeing that I don't.
Tom, I have something I'd like to ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
So we've been dancing around the parking issue, and I think we should be really blunt about it. There is no solution. The site itself has enough places for one room, one space, and then an individual who would be working as the proprietor of the operation. In most cases, it's impossible for a small inn, even in this size, to operate on the basis of a single person. You have to rotate people. There are regulations at the state level as to how long somebody works before they have a break.
Let me answer that for you in real quick, because they discussed this at length at the zoning board meeting a week or so ago, or 2 weeks ago. They actually think they can run it with one person, and then I believe the owner of the Red Lion Inn came in and said that they even operate their place which has almost double the number of rooms with one person. They did say at the zoning board hearing that, custodial staff would be coming in, outside contracted custodial staff would be coming in, change the rooms and sheets and all that. And they will need to either park in a public space on the street or use the loading zone space while they're there, but it's, relatively short term. I don't want to get into it too much because it's a little outside our jurisdiction, but they did say to the zoning board they could operate an 8-room inn with one person. And then, like I said, someone who owns another hotel in town said they do it with even more rooms. So I hear what you're saying. I found that a little incredulous when I heard it too, but that's the proposal for that. And
Well,
like I said, Like I said a few minutes ago, the applicant has to come up with solutions for the emergency and the overly stressed parking situations. I think it's logical to assume, and you know, our bylaw reflects only one space per room because it's logical to assume that a couple traveling only has one vehicle. But you know, they came up with a creative solution for the Atlantica site, and they may need to apply that same solution to this site. Again, that might fall within the zoning board's permit rather than our permit here. But, you know, I think at our next meeting and at their next meeting with the zoning board, they need to be prepared to address these what ifs, because they're not illogical what ifs. They are going to have outside help to come in and clean the rooms. They are going to have situations where, despite their fill, they may be confronting a very high tide in a flooded parking lot. So it's not for us to create the solution for them, but they're going to have to. And I'd like to hear that, what that solution might be the next time we get together.
So are you suggesting that that is a requirement? That there be a parking plan in the next discussion that we have?
Well, let me just go back to...
Chair Callahan, it's Adam Brodsky. The zoning board did request additional information with respect to parking compliance, and we're preparing that information for the zoning board of appeals.
Yeah, and I'm looking at the site plan review criteria, number 4, convenience of parking and loading areas in relation to the contemplated use of the site. So it's somewhat is our concern as well. So whatever information you provide to the zoning board on this, please share it with us as well.
Maybe I could also just add that the way we've organized the project, and we've developed a lot of hotels, is around the idea that there is essentially one full-time manager. And we really focused on the zoning requirement of 1 space per room and 1 space for the employee. And as Tom had mentioned, Red Lion does operate with essentially 1 manager at the front desk. And what Jill Tedeschi had brought up when I was talking about Boston Yacht Haven was not an architectural comparison, that was an operational comparison. So just to point that out, we're not trying to reflect that sort of design. It's an operational basis. Boston Yacht Haven is a 10-room hotel. Red Lion's a 14-room hotel. And there's another example we have in Wolfboro that we're going to share with the zoning board, which is another 10-room hotel that essentially has 1 full-time manager. And so we're trying to create a property that is a self-sufficient occupancy hotel type of property. And the cleaning is always outsourced. So that's our solution. And we have examples to prove how operational hotels can run that way, Amy. I understand the challenge that you're discussing, but we've solved the site according to zoning. And what we're looking at is how we operate that hotel compared to other similar properties. And I think George McGoldrick was helpful when he talked about even the Red Lion, which actually has more rooms, can run off of 1 person. We're not talking about food and beverage. We don't have food and beverage here. We don't have a restaurant. All cleaning is outsourced. They do go to the loading zone, and the loading zone that's striped inside the bottom of the boathouses where the trash containers are and all the cleaning supplies. That's a cycle in, cycle out. And so we've organized the program as an operational property, but also one that conforms to zoning. And it fits like a puzzle. It's tight, but we have examples that show how operationally it works, and it conforms to zoning as we see it.
All right. We've given this an hour and a half, and we have some other business to attend to, so we are going to continue this to another night. I noticed we have one question from Barbara Canny, 353 South Main, about the purpose of the open space over the waterway with the window in the floor. Again, if I understand it correctly, there is a deck out there now, and this is just a continuation of that deck. And I think what was described is that the hole in it is just to look at the water. As it, in that location, it runs, with tide going in and out, it can be very impressive to look at. So it's more of aesthetics than anything else, but.
Yeah.
All right, before we figure on the continuation date, I just want to make sure from Cassandra or Carolyn, any comments or things that we need to address and at the next hearing?
I have no comments.
Okay.
Nor do I, thank you.
All right, so Cassandra, what are we looking at for a continued hearing date?
So your next two dates are October 9th, which will be the start of your section 5 hearing.
Mhm.
The next scheduled date after that is October 24th.
Why don't we shoot for the 24th? Is that all right with everyone? I don't really want it to conflict with our section 5 hearing. If we can avoid it, this one, despite the limits of our jurisdiction, it just engenders a long conversation and discussion. So I'd rather if we could do this to the 24th, so. Not hearing an objection to that, I'll make the motion that we continue this to Wednesday, October 24th at 6:30 PM.
May I just note that I'm looking at the calendar and October 24th is the Thursday? Just wanted to clarify that.
Well, then it's the
That's a
23rd.
good, yeah, let me just confirm that. But thank you for catching that.
And unless I'm looking at the wrong one here.
No, I think you're right, actually.
You are right, so it is the
Yeah,
23rd.
absolutely.
Apologies.
Motion is-
23rd.
Motion is to continue it to Wednesday, October 23rd at 6:30.
Thank you.
All right, all in favor, alphabetical roll call?
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Birgit Wittbesch, aye.
And all the new material and submission should be to us at least a week before. Maybe even 2 weeks, but as soon as you can. And if you needed permission for this board to speak to directly to Weston and Sampson, that's fine. It's usually not a problem.
Thank you, Chair Callahan.
Thank
Okay,
you.
we'll see you then on the 23rd.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right,
All right, thank you.
Thank you for everybody in the public who attended. All right. All right. Next, I'll just quickly get them out of the way. We have minutes to approve for August 28th and September 4. Can I have a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor? Alphabetical roll call.
Clark Brewer, aye.
Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, aye.
Birgit Wittbesch, aye.
Thank you. All right, with zoning. Let me screen share. Where is it? There it is. I understand that while I was away, all of this was circulated to y'all, so. I just said y'all because I've been down south for a week. All right, so there are two additions to the lineup. Well, one is we have a fill-in for what we had a place setting for. The last one is an addition that we talked about briefly, which is now going to be Article 10, and it's, again, I'm not clearly understanding what the problem was. I don't know if it's here, but is it here? No, oh yeah, those are the regulations. I'm sorry. Let me just get to it quickly. 8:10. The zoning board had brought to our attention that a note to the old table of area regulations was omitted inadvertently when we redid the table. So this article, at the request of the zoning board, is to bring that note back into it. So I think it's pretty straightforward. The significance of it, the zoning board believed it was significant, or Woody believed it was significant. So Carol and I don't know if this quick nutshell explanation of it, why it's significant, but I have no problem with it either way when it comes to those.
No, I think you have accurately captured at least Woody Chittick's concern. I did forward to you though, the actual language of an article and where this would be located. I can coordinate with you tomorrow, Cassandra. Maybe it was in a draft that wasn't fully circulated to the board. I'm not sure.
Okay. All right, and then the other, I'm presuming nobody in the board has an issue with that one, so I don't really want to spend our valuable time discussing it. So anyway, then the next thing that was added was Carolyn's draft of a development impact bylaw for the town. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Carolyn, to just give us the summary of what you're doing here with that. As far as your note here in the yellow about standalone, I mean, I found it as a standalone bylaw in, Hanover and Dedham. We had designed the new Article 11 under the reorganization to be the place where this would go. I'd rather something like this be in one place rather than spread over different parts of the bylaw referenced in special permits and site plan reviews. Just as a matter of organization, but if you could tell us what you've proposed here to us and how it will apply, I appreciate that.
Okay, so if I can just address that one comment at the top, because something that sort of a critical decision for the board to make is to decide to what uses will this new bylaw apply. And the reason that matters is because we've also got to think about whether we're incorporating any by right uses or just uses that would otherwise be allowed by special permit or site plan review. And the reason that then matters is, as you all know, if it's just a use allowed by right, then the only person who reviews it for the most part is the building inspector. And the building inspector is not necessarily going to be someone who's going to be in a position to be assessing impacts or deciding what might be appropriate mitigation for those impacts. So if we make sure, or if you decide that what you're going to do is make sure that any sort of use that's subject to special permit or site plan review, then we already know that there is a process in place for either the planning board or the zoning board of appeals to have to review that project. And in the context of reviewing that project, you can apply the provisions of this bylaw in addition to whatever applicable provisions might come before you. So that's something to bear in mind in this process. What I did here was I tried to use Tom's draft from earlier in the year as sort of a beginning point, but I also did some research looking at other communities, and I want to be clear to everybody that there are not a lot of communities that have a bylaw such as this. There are actually some that do have a bylaw or an ordinance in cases where it's actually been allowed by special legislation. But there are some, I know Tom mentioned Hanover and Dedham. I know Medway, for example, and a few other communities, they do have concepts of this type of a bylaw sprinkled throughout their bylaw without any kind of special legislation. But the thing to bear in mind is that regardless of, say, special legislation, there's case law that goes along with this. And in particular, some constitutional case law that makes it clear that a planning board such as yourself could certainly assess the impacts of a development and could certainly require some mitigation for that development. But it is supposed to be reasonable and proportionate to the particular impact that's created. So I want you to bear that in mind as you review this or think about how you want to fill in some of the blanks here. I hear at a lot of board meetings that, oh, traffic is terrible in that particular area of town. Well, traffic is terrible without the proposed development. And it may not be the responsibility of the developer currently before you to cure your traffic problems. Could they be required to make some kind of mitigation contribution towards some traffic calming measures, or maybe some roadway widening improvements or traffic signalization? All of that, yes. But you've also required that in the past of certain developments, even without the benefit of this bylaw being in place. So with that, I don't know that there's much to say about the purposes. It kind of just follows the general purposes and intents of a bylaw such as this, to basically promote public health and safety, but also to be able to allow for on-site and off-site mitigation where we can actually get the permission of a private property owner if necessary.
I'll just say to that, I mean, as an attorney, I understood too that the law requires that there be reasonableness and a actual tie to the impact of the specific development, and it's just not a bylaw to be, or a power to be used as an open checkbook to take care of all your town's ills. That would be complete. And so planning boards and zoning boards going forward are going to have to always understand that that's been the law even before this. One of the real purposes of doing it, I mean, this came up from other people bringing it up over the last couple of years. And for this board, you know, we recently dealt with that small, and we always deal with relatively small subdivisions, but we were challenged at some point about our authority to require improvements. And, you know, particularly the old portion of Black Horse Lane is very narrow. It could use some improvement with added driving loads on it. And part of the reason of having something like this in writing is, even though, you know, boards in the past, zoning and planning boards in the past may have been able to get some mitigating conditions as part of a special permit, that's more of a process of a negotiation and a give and take. I think the hotel project was a lot of that. But this is part of the reason for this, is to give us some on paper legal authority in the appropriate circumstances to actually demand certain mitigations. I think that has a great benefit to us when we confront those situations where there's some pushback from a developer to extend a sidewalk or widen a road or something like that. So, and as to where this applies, I would agree we probably should not impact as of right uses. I mean, the target of this is really development in the commercial districts more so. I don't see this really being applicable to a single family structure. But the only residential context we were really looking at here was subdivisions and, you know, commercial development on 3A, and looking ahead to the possibility that we will get a development under the MBTA Communities Act. That will be of significant size. It will generate a significant amount of traffic, and you know, we're looking towards the future of what that might be and what impacts it might bring, and preparing ourselves to be able to address those impacts with some written authority to do so. So I think those, unless anybody else has any thoughts on this, I really think commercial and large-scale residential in the form of subdivisions is really what we're the only targets, the only logical targets in this. I don't know if anybody else has a thought on that.
I'd like to comment on this. The reason we're doing this is exactly not the reason you're talking about. We're doing this because we have an unusual situation in which the remaining land that is developable is situated often in existing communities with previous infrastructure. And if the scale of the vehicles and all of the work that goes on is as large as it has been in individual places, the people who have been there bear the full cost of the consequence, not the new resident. What we're trying to do is to find a way to establish the starting conditions of a location, and then considering the consequences of what is being expected from the development. I feel like you're trying to erode the point we're making, and you've done it over and over again.
I'm not, Amy, I don't disagree with anything you just said. And if you're looking right into what's on the screen in front of you at the moment about parking, increases in parking and traffic, this is taken straight from the Hanover bylaw and was always part of the draft that I had proposed, that I just don't think, like in a comment that's coming down further here, you know, where an increase in gross floor area is a trigger, and it should be. But, you know, is the increase, 10,000 square feet is awfully large for a single family home, but if we put some number on a single family home, really what adverse impact is a single family home going to do? Now, if it's like in your neighborhood and there's 2 or 3 houses that a common developer is doing, it's not a subdivision, quote unquote, but it is multiple houses, we should probably address that. A single house, I don't think needs this. Multiple houses do, subdivisions do, and commercial certainly does. And nothing you've said I disagree with, because all of these things have potential impact that we was trying to address. And let's remember, Black Horse Lane was 4 houses. And I don't think we had the tools to adequately address the impact on the old portion of Black Horse Lane. And I wish we did, but, and that's a small project. We're not a town that's going to have subdivisions of 50 houses anymore. There's not really much place to put those. But, you know, we could just come up with some reasonable numbers. Again, the law already requires us to be reasonable.
Well, and I don't think that the condition I'm describing is unreasonable. When a new structure is being built, the roads have to be opened up, the gutters have to be opened up, the ground has to be graded, and a whole host of activities have to take place. If we could guarantee that those who do those individual tasks do them to the condition and bring them back up to the condition that they were, this would be a non-issue. But that's not what's happening. There's no regulation to ensure that the person who rips up the macadam then actually does the repatching in a way so that it doesn't actually create a series of future erosion conditions. That's the point.
I get it. I get it. So I don't know that it's in here, Carolyn, in so many words, but something to the effect that even if it's a single family house development, if it disturbs infrastructure, we need some guarantee or requirement that the infrastructure is returned to its previous state and is not adversely impacted by the added load of a house, whether it be for drainage, coming onto the street, or traffic, traffic loads or what have you. I don't know how we word that correctly.
There is some language later on when I got into the section of possible types of mitigation that the board could consider or could be imposed.
All right. So, but in terms of the applicability, let's be clear about that. So we have the increased parking trigger, the increased traffic generation trigger. We have an increase in gross floor area, new construction. I would say, multifamily and commercial would be at the same standard, and I would say an increase of, I'd go as low as 5,000 square feet.
The only thing I want to just reiterate there is the MBTA zoning, where multifamily is a use allowed by right. So if we are going to decide,
But it is a use subject to site plan review.
yep,
So for a lot of the commercial development on 3A may only be subject to site plan review. It might not be a special permit. The village and the harbors are going to always have special permits and site plan review. So you know, in terms of permitting, you're making it applicable to anything with a special permit. Any commercial multifamily with a special permit and any subject to site plan review.
if we include site plan review and special permit as in our applicability provision, yes, you will capture
Okay,
all of those.
that's how I would word that. Now, as far as residential, we would clearly be targeting subdivisions that are done under chapter 325 of the bylaw. And to address Amy's concern and what happened up in her neighborhood is we would have to capture any type of residential development of more than X number of lots by a common owner or developer.
Tom, I think all we have to do is when we have a project, take a series of pictures, document the situation, and then look at the end game and as to what has happened. And if it's
All right, I get it. And Carolyn says she has language in here that deals with the type of mitigation we would require. But before you get to the type that you could apply, you have to decide what it's applying to. And you have to wording it for commercial and multifamily projects that are subject to special permits or site plan is easy. Wording it to make it applicable to a subdivision under the subdivision control law is easy. Wording it to apply to what you're describing is either multiple houses that are not a subdivision being built by the same developer, or even a single family house that is being developed that tears up road, drainage, or whatever. The thing is how to word that properly and Carolyn's.
So can't we let Carolyn take a stab at it and then
That's what I'm asking her to do. She's hearing it. I don't have the magic thing off the top of my head of how to word that. I'm trying to capture what you want to capture.
And I don't want you to refer this as mine, because there are plenty of neighborhoods in Cohasset that have complained about the deterioration of their infrastructure as the result of other projects. So please don't, and just because I pointed it out is one thing, but I don't need.
But your neighborhood provides an excellent example of it because there was pretty extensive development of some of those lots around you, blasting and all other kinds of impacts up there that, you know, the complete gutting and redo of a house on my street didn't come close to having those kind of impacts. I get it that they're all over the place, but the question is just how do we word that properly? And Carolyn's hearing this, and that I think those are the targets we are looking for. The three easy ones.
Can I just ask too? I'm sorry.
No,
I just want Carolyn to be aware. So if we go back to our neighborhood, which is different than a lot of other places, we are a private road. So I'm just curious where that leaves us. That the town keeps telling us, if we want to fix this, it's ours. So I'm just curious how you tie a contractor developer to a private road. I don't, Carolyn, if that makes a difference, just want to say it.
Yep.
It does. And, you know, maybe it might make sense that, look, we can come back to what the thresholds should be as to what projects should be applicable. I don't think we have to decide right here and now, 5,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, or something like that. We can kind of come back to it. But the concept here is that whatever you decide the thresholds will be, that
Yeah.
these are the uses to which this development impact bylaw will apply. The developer's going to have to come up and maybe if you scroll down just a little bit to that paragraph C that's just starting to show on the screen.
Yeah.
The developer's going to have to provide this development impact assessment report.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to look at all of these impacts, whether it's on town resources or trees being cut down, or the impact right there on infrastructure, wear and tear on existing roads, pre and post construction assessment of sidewalks, culverts, anything like that, pedestrian access, water and sewage capacity, and on-site solid waste. And I think there's still a couple more. We could keep scrolling down. That also,
I'm sorry, Carolyn, I was just wondering if it needs to say not just roadways, but public and private roadways. I don't know if that's necessary. I'm just asking.
I don't think it is, Deidre, but I mean, we could certainly clarify public or private. I mean, we're looking for the impact
Right.
for primarily the roadway that's going to provide access to this site. That can be public or private. I mean, I can certainly add that language in. And then what I expect would happen is this report, including, any other sort of impacts on abutting properties or the neighborhood, gets submitted to the planning board or gets submitted to the zoning board of appeals. You're allowed to use peer review consultants to take a look at those, and then it helps kind of inform what is the mitigation. And this section here that Tom has just started to scroll through. Some of these are some things that I saw in other bylaws that I thought might be good ideas. Some of these are things that I've simply drafted based on hearing your concerns. But I think this is really the heart of the bylaw that concerns you most, which it really gets into that the developer could be required to provide on-site mitigation, off-site mitigation,
Yeah.
or maybe even some kind of in lieu of mitigation. So,
Yeah, I would make sure you put in the flexibility of that.
Yep.
There may be situations, for example, going back to Black Horse Lane, there may have been property line and taking issues that the developer could not have widened Black Horse Lane even if we wanted them to.
Mm-hmm.
And in that case, we took a cash payment in lieu of that to at least be able to repave and improve the road when it's going to need it. That may not be the best of examples, but given the tools or lack of tools, it was the best outcome we could come to. But I think we should have that flexibility of that. And I'm trying to think of the other analogy we have about where we can take payments in lieu.
Affordable housing.
Affordable housing. Yeah, I mean, it would be the last preference probably to actually doing something as opposed to doing something on the ground, but where it's impossible, at least we would have the flexibility to say, well, then this is going to cost you 50,000, 100,000, whatever, to mitigate this.
Well, bear in mind sometimes when a town has like a planned project coming, whether it's part of like your 5-year capital plan, or we know, that road is going to be repaved in 2 years, or we know the road's going to be widened in a couple of years. Rather than have the developer make some physical improvements to the road that the town is just going to dig up 2 years later and redo, I think in those instances, it makes more sense to then say, make a contribution to the town that they then apply to offset the town's costs for whatever the planned project happens to be.
Right.
So I agree.
Yeah, and one of our conditions to the condo project at the hotel site was for them to contribute to the cost, probably a drop in the bucket, of relocating that green space and redesigning the intersection out in front of it now. Doesn't look like it's ever gonna happen, but you know, that was the concept we were looking for. We couldn't make them do it because it wasn't their property to do it to, but we got, you know, a commitment towards some financial contribution towards ultimately what might be done there. And that's a great option for us. Because we're not going to be able to dictate a certain outcome in every circumstance, so. I think some of the mitigation things, this section D, I think it has a lot of good stuff here because it's addressing the things that we're all talking about. This one you mentioned, number 5. If that strays from our jurisdiction, so be it. I mean, I maybe just wording it in such a way that you at least have to address these issues with the appropriate board, which I think you've done here in the unhighlighted portion at the beginning. I think there's no harm in putting that in there. We're not going to be dictating the specific wastewater mitigation or the wetlands mitigation, but we're at least saying it's part of our process that you're going to address that with the appropriate board.
Right. One thing, if we could scroll back up to just where D begins, because I think this might go to Deirdre's comment. At the very, the second to the last sentence of that opening paragraph D, I added, to the extent that any mitigation is proposed for private property, the mitigation may be recommended by the planning board or ZBA, but it is subject to the consent of the property owner. So we're not saying that there cannot be some improvements required for private property, but the town doesn't have the ability to compel that on private property.
Which is exactly what we confronted with the condo project.
Right. I will tell you that, I frequently include conditions in permits that I'm involved in that, requires landscaping or screening or something like that to be constructed on the abutting neighbor's property. And it's always got to be subject to, obviously, the property owner's consent and then working out some kind of an agreement. Can I say that the landscaping is always built? No. Sometimes the parties are just not able to reach agreement on it, or maybe the property or the abutter decides they'd rather take the $10,000 in value of landscaping than actually have the trees and shrubs planted. But at least we put it out there, that this is not just designed to protect town roads. And then if you look at paragraph 1, mitigation for generation of increased traffic volume. This is by no means meant to be an exhaustive list, but we could require, again, that the roadway be widened, or maybe that there be donations of the roadway to widen it if that is possible or deemed necessary. Installing sidewalks, extending sidewalks, other kinds of traffic calming measures, maybe signalization, but I've also added in restoring the main road, providing access to the development to its pre-development condition or better. And including any sort of repair to curbing or to sidewalks. So that is going to require some kind, as part of this development assessment, is going to require some review of what is the current state of the road. And, I suppose we might get some pushback from a developer who says, well, I'm not the only one using that road, but that doesn't mean we can't require some kind of contribution or the restoration of the site, or the roadway once it's done.
Yeah, and the answer to the developer is, yeah, maybe so, but you're the one who's going to be adding to the impact that's going to tip this poorly designed road or poorly constructed road over the edge. So, we could muddle through without your development, but your development's going to tip it over the edge. So, all right. So, does anybody else on the board have any thoughts about the concept of all of this or some specifics? I think Carolyn's heard a lot. So you know, getting back to the start of it, the applicability, I would say any new construction or expansion of commercial or multifamily property that requires a special permit or site plan review. As a catch-all, if there's somehow an expansion that doesn't need a special permit or a site plan review, we put in a an expansion of X square foot of gross floor area. I would make it low, but 5,000, 10,000, whatever. 5,000, I would suggest. Subdivisions under the chapter 325 in the subdivision control law. And then the tricky thing that Carolyn has to think about, and everybody on this board can think about, appropriate language is to capture the impacts of residential development that's not a subdivision development, but nevertheless can have impacts on infrastructure. And how we just word that. So I do you, and then I think Deirdre's point is well taken. If you can mention public or private roadways, put those words in just to make it crystal clear. That would be great. But I mean, I like this overall, and I appreciate, you know, the challenge of doing this, knowing what Hanover and Dedham's bylaw says. I like this little excerpt you found from Medway about
Carbon sequestration, you know, the clear.
Yeah, no, I think that, you know, that's truly unique, and
I will tell you that's from a solar and other very large scale projects. So, you know, considering my highlighted language as an alternative, but still, tree clearing, tree preservation is something that is a concern.
yeah, and
State right now across the country.
particularly if we, for example, if we go to a greater frontage, you know, to more suburban-like frontage. Again, probably the reason we deviated from suburban-like frontage in 1969 was to avoid the subdivision and the cul-de-sac and basically having to create a new road to create the adequate frontage. If we go in that direction and go back into the direction that land will have to be developed by cul-de-sacs, that is going to involve more physical destruction of the landscape. So having something like this for that scenario would be great. If we keep the current frontage at 50 and allow for the pork chop lots and the development of backland that way, so be it. But there's still the potential of deforestation in any development project. So I think this is a great addition, you know. I'm glad somebody else invented it before we had to come up with it. So all right, given our time frame, we are scheduled to roll some of this out to the public on the 30th. We are scheduled for our Section 5 hearing in October, again, to keep to the timeline. Can I suggest that we have a brief meeting next Wednesday to just finalize this bylaw and perhaps some others that we get to in a moment? But, you know, summarizing it as I did the last time, you know, the changes to the wind, solar, fine. ADUs, fine. This new thing that Woody wants, fine. We have to finalize this, and a couple of land alteration is going to be the next thing I want to take on, but we'll have to meet next week briefly to just finalize this up to have everything ready to go for process. I am also was added to the calendar today, meeting the select board on the 24th, which is next Tuesday, I guess, to go over the state of this. And again, I'll remind you the pledge with the select board that I had at the beginning of this process is that let these things go, and the town's either going to approve them or they're not. And I don't expect all of these to get approved, by the way. So, you know, there was some sentiment expressed to me today that this is too much, but we dealt with 8 bylaws the last time. This is the final go around. We will have addressed every portion of the bylaw. You know, in a perfect world, we would have done it all in one fell swoop with a special town meeting, but we didn't. We're doing it in pieces, but let's get the pieces done. So to keep to that timeline, we'll have to get together next week. So to skip over that one now, since Carolyn has some ideas, let's go to the floor area ratio.
Can I say something, Tom, before
Sure.
we go there?
Sure.
So I just want, because I was asked to go before the select board to give them an update on where we are with the bylaw changes. I want everyone to recognize that we're putting a lot before the board, and they made that very clear. And so one of the things I think we have to figure out is how do we promote this in a way that doesn't make it sound like we're trying to twist their arms, but to really individually and as a board communicate to them what it is we're trying to do. My concern leaving the meeting last night was that there was sentiment about if you try to do too much, you will get very little. And I don't know what to do with that, except report that.
Well, since your comment to me earlier today about that, I have gotten debriefed about what happened last night as well. I understand one select person raised that issue, not all of them. They have been extremely supportive of this process through the last couple of years, as well as this final go around. Again, I expect most of these things to pass in the same way the 8 passed last spring, because a lot of them aren't controversial. I expect that the floor area ratio and the frontage change, if we decide to go forward with, especially the frontage one, which I want to talk about in a minute, if we decide to do that, I don't know that those will pass. I really don't. And if they don't, that's fine. My only request of you and the select board and the community is let the community vote on it. Let's not make this a decision about a handful of people. And if they don't pass, they don't pass. And if they don't pass, they don't upset. There's not like a whole scheme of the bylaw that's going to get upset. These are reforms that in most cases stand on their own merits. They rise and fall on their own merits. And if they rise or fall, the bylaw goes on with all of our other reforms just as easily as it would with, you know, if the decision was in another way. So let's just, you know, the 30th is going to be, you know, again, the last time in the spring when we did the public forum, we had 7 people. I don't expect a monstrous turnout. The select board is a better forum. Let's just see what people think. We always have the opportunity to withdraw things. And I don't have any pride in seeing everything go and have a vote or not, but if we withdraw things, so be it, if that's the way to go. But it's a long process. We've done it piecemeal. It's been difficult, I think, to do it piecemeal, much more difficult. Let's just get it done. We're that close to the finish line with these last 10.
I guess my only last comment is that for all of us, if we run into a select person, we should convey to them our sentiments about the hard work that's been done, the objectives that we have, and the desire of us to be pursuing a change in bylaws that are ancient that could really make the community better.
Yeah.
Because each individual can do that.
Yeah, and they've, you know, and the one select person that I've been told that expressed that point of view has been nothing but a supporter of what we've been doing here and was on the bylaw committee previous to being a selectman. So I don't want to give away his identity completely, but I think his concern comes from disputes on one infecting all the others. I don't think that's gonna happen because I think these 10 each stand on their own merits in such a way. The wind, solar, the floodplain change, the ADU change, the woody change. I think those go through without a problem because those are much like the ones in the spring, really, really housekeeping oriented. I think this development impact, once we get a clear definition of what it applies to and can explain that, I think that won't be a problem. These others are going to be a problem, and they'll come at the end and again, make the case. And if they don't pass, it's not the end of the world because they wouldn't be upsetting the overall scheme of the reform of the bylaw. Again, they're being proposed for change for a reason, but if the town doesn't want to make that change, to make that leap, so be it. And then the consequences of the decision one way or the other will come to us in the future.
So that just to, kind of clarify, Tom, so that is in particular the land alteration because look, the way I have it in my mind to frame what we're doing with land alteration is it's not a radical change from what is, it's cleaning it up. I think the current bylaw and the way it was written as a compromise after the defeat of the citizens petition, I think became overly confusing. It's awkward, it's choppy, it has these references to assessor parcels and assessor classifications that we don't usually use in the bylaw. Substantively, what's being proposed here is no different. The thresholds are no different. They're just organized, I think, in just a cleaner, neater fashion and getting rid of confusing references to assessor land use classifications. Like I said, that we don't use in the bylaw as a general rule. So I don't think that's going to be a hard sell. I think the part that we are changing to that is that we are taking away some of the exemptions of the accessory structures. There may be pushback on that part of it. But, we have some classic examples now to show people of what happens when you allow the alteration to basically cover, where the exemptions are so large, there's really no protection. So I don't think that one's going to be the problem. I think obviously the frontage change has ramifications in the pattern of future development, and the floor area ratio is just because it's a new concept that is not hard to explain, but it's just a new concept. And anyway, so to the floor area ratio, again, I had a discussion with somebody, I can't remember who it was, after our last meeting. And again, these numbers for each of the districts are based on averages of house sizes in each of the districts under our current bylaw. And I know somebody's made an inquiry to me about potentially purchasing a small lot, an undersized lot, well undersized lot in Residence C. And what would what would the new house be able to be? And I did the calculation and they're not happy with that. It's still a pretty good sized house, but but it's proportional to the lot size, and the lot size is far under the, 60 or 80,000 square feet that's required for residency. So, and we have plenty of examples to bring of what is happening on a particular property. We have some newer permits that we can look at and compare what could happen on a lot under our current zoning and what is happening on our lots versus what this would do. So to those of you who say there's no examples of this, yes, there's examples that I'm preparing to show everybody for public forum. And I've mentioned some of them here. But anyway, the suggestion came to me was that, well, is there room to fudge with these numbers? And I said, well, of course there is. And a suggestion was to make a uniform floor area ratio applicable to all the districts, and the number thrown out was 0.15. Now, if we did that, you're looking at, since the RA proposal is 0.17,
RA, of course, is our smallest lots, but also the most densely packed lots where a house is covering a lot of the lot area. It is the one district where we approach our 20% lot coverage, almost on average. If you reduce that to 0.15, obviously an RA house becomes smaller. RB would be slightly larger. And again, the RB average is 0.12. The most recent new construction RB we just permitted would have been a 0.11. And it's an over 5,000 square foot house. There would be a significant change in RC because the RC average is pretty small because people are building, houses in the average and the tradition, the average used to be 4,000 square feet across all three districts. Now it's 5,000 square feet plus. So RC being bigger lots has a smaller lot coverage percentage with people keeping within it, but do you want to see a house that has 20% lot coverage on RC? And then the trend is people are building bigger and bigger houses. So 0.15 to go in RC would be very generous, I think, if we did that. Now, we don't have to do uniform amongst the three districts. We can just make them different. But just change the numbers from 0.09 and 0.12 and 0.17 to something different. Or make them all 0.13, 14, 15. I'm open to that suggestion. I think the concept is to try to get proportionality and to not let a trend of building mega houses on lots come to us. I mean, this is sort of preventative. We haven't seen really an egregious example yet. To prevent this from coming to us and to keep the development in line with what we have historically experienced. These numbers represent our historic experience up to at least to 2021, 2022. So I'll entertain thoughts on that about whether these numbers work or slightly different numbers work. But the concept will be easy to explain to people. It's a question, do they want to go there? I already heard at the last town meeting, a member of the school committee get up and will profess the view that people should have the unfettered right to do what they want. Well, that's not what zoning law is about, but that argument can be dealt with, but that's the argument we're facing here. And we on this board have seen firsthand houses of 9,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet, houses on Windy Hill that are only 4,800 square feet, but they're out of scale for the rest of the neighborhood. So explaining that on a scale basis, I think will be easy. It's just a question of picking what is the right number. Do we hold fast to these 2021 averages, or do we allow for some future growth and some expansion in the size of houses? I'll see, what does everybody think about it? I can go forward justifying these numbers. I can go forward justifying another number that we'd like to come up with.
I'm disappointed Clark's not here because he had a strong opinion to opine on these and used examples from various neighborhoods we live in about how they were inadequate.
I'm sorry, I can't see where everybody is. So he's not here again?
No.
He did this at the last, all right, well, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm already prepared for the fact that at town meeting, we're going to be in the unique position where the board is the sponsor of the articles, and I will get up there and promote them and present them. And then there will be opposition from members of our own board. I don't have a problem with that, but I'm expecting it and just deal with it. The rest of you, do these numbers work? Yeah, go ahead, Carolyn. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question because I think actually this is something that really just goes to the editing. I don't know that we need the total column showing there anymore with the 30 in it. That mattered when we were talking about maximum lot coverage, and we wanted lot coverage that was attributed to buildings versus lot coverage that would be buildings plus, other impervious surfaces. But either we don't need that column to, with 30 in it to be there anymore, because floor area ratio, by definition, is only applicable to the buildings, unless we want to change that total column to keep that the maximum percentage of lot coverage in total at 30.
Yeah, I thought long and hard about that, and one of the other things is the limitations of lot clearing. I had originally proposed to be moved into the, as a column in this table, so all of those kinds of measurements in one place, and you'd see that you had a naked, an undeveloped lot, you'd know how much of it you can clear, how much of it you could have total impervious material, including driveways, tennis courts, patios, pools, which is what the 30 captures, and then the primary building would be subject to the floor area ratio, where today it's subject to the lot coverage footprint number. And by the way, that's another alternative. I mean, what floor area ratio does is deal with the bulk of the building and get you away from two-dimensional zoning into three-dimensional zoning, which I think is much more logical. But an alternative to this, if we fear people pushing the limits on 20% lot coverage, is reduce the lot coverage to 15% across the board. That's an alternative. But I thought, and thinking long and hard about this, with the floor area ratio to be the buildings, but also knowing that people want driveways, tennis courts, pools, that's why I was keeping in the total impervious coverage and the 30% number. I think they can work together.
Okay, I think we just need to, I'll make another edit then to the text of it to make sure we preserve then the heading of maximum percentage lot coverage total. So I can do that.
Yeah, okay. And then again, by the way, we also are proposing this ability to exceed the FAR, whatever number we set it at, through a special permit process. So, one of the points to make about this is isn't going to end large homes in Cohasset, not by a long shot. But if you have the lot to support it, you'll be able to build as big as a house as you want. It's just to bring the concept of proportionality into play. And, I think that's, we have the large home developers in town, people who want big houses. We also know from our experiences how many neighbors we're now getting at large home reviews who oppose these things. Again, in 2017, it passed. It got a majority. It failed like 2/3 by 6 votes. So I think we'll get a majority again. But whether we get over the 2/3 threshold is another question. But the number itself, again, if there's thoughts on this, I guess we can deal with the finalization of it next week, but give some thought to that. I don't have a huge problem changing some of these numbers. I wouldn't want them to go way out of whack. The RC is really, I think, interesting how low the FAR is, because to date, we're not seeing maximized development on RC, but we could. And we know we've seen examples. We're seeing the examples more in RB than we are RC, but there are examples out there. So let me go, we'll finish the night on land alteration briefly, but the other two, the frontage and the residential cluster. So the residential cluster bylaw was a tool that's, I don't know, Carolyn, they started getting popular in the 80s and early 90s. It was basically to say, you're going to do a subdivision and you can get in 10 lots into that subdivision. Well, you can get those 10 lots with smaller frontages and lot areas if you give X percentage of open space. They're called open space bylaws, residential cluster bylaws, blah, blah, blah. Our threshold for that is 10 acres, and I don't think we're ever going to see a 10-acre or better subdivision. Maybe we will. Maybe Black Horse Lane is over 10 acres. I don't think so. But I would suggest, my suggestion, if we change anything here, we reduced the 10 acres to 5. And I think Clark has mentioned that going back years to reduce it from 10 to 5, number one. And number two, then one incentive that our cluster bylaw does not do, but other bylaws do, is to give a density bonus. So our cluster bylaw, like I said, is structured that if you could get 10 lots into a given area of land, you're only going to get 10 lots in the cluster development. You're just going to be able to do them at smaller lot sizes than required because you're giving us open space. The density bonus says if you give X amount of open space or some other amenity, you would be able to squeeze 11 or 12 lots into what normally you would only be entitled to 10 lots. And that's more of an incentive for someone to give open space. Again, if we were in a town that was facing a lot of subdivision growth, you know, we had wide open lands or further out, the T is just or commuter rail to us. I think this is very, very important to make these changes. Not as important for us. And this is where this ties into frontage that I was mentioning a few moments ago. So when Cohasset passed its bylaw in 55, we had only 2 residential districts. And I believe the frontages were 100 and 150 feet. Typical of what lots of suburban towns have now. Our uniform 50-foot frontage is relatively unique in my experience. I don't know, Carolyn, and yours, but it would be more applicable to a compact, older town, a city, or a downtown village type of area, but you don't see it applied all over the place like we do. And I can only speculate, 1969, that change was made. And in that period of time, Cohasset started to see cul-de-sac development I would suspect for the first time in a large scale. My Street, Riverview, Fair Oaks Lane may have come a little later, but it was probably, somebody was looking at it. There were probably some other cul-de-sacs in town that were developed during the mid to late 60s. And I think somebody made the value judgment that, well, this is going to encourage a lot of development, a lot more population. And back in the 60s, I think we were in the 5,000s in our population. We're now at 8 for the first time. And with going to 50, as we all know from the present day, what we've had is that land in the rear has been developed by a skinny pork chop that can get out a strip of 50-foot frontage on the main road, and then the lot widens in the back. And you use long driveways or common driveways. Now we reduced the number of houses that can be served by a common driveway from 8 to 4. That's one curve on that kind of development. And the question is, has that kind of development been better or worse for Cohasset compared to had we stayed with what we used to have? An example I was personally involved with was off of Forest Ave. And I represented a client who was on a common driveway with 3 houses, and he was the one in the rear. And the neighbor had a lot of land and was going to develop 6 lots with 6 separate driveways coming off Forest Ave, and all of them skinny little necks of 50 feet that got out. And there were reasons to challenge it about illusory access and all that stuff, but I lost that at the planning board at the time. I lost that in court. So that property had 6 lots developed on it that was allowed under our zoning. Now, if we had 100-foot frontage, what would have happened? Well, maybe they still would have been developed in the same way, with each of them having an individual skinny driveway out to the street. There would have only been 3 instead of 5, 6. Or the owner would have had to cut in a cul-de-sac road, knock down a lot more trees than the driveways would have, and develop it a little bit more intensely, because then with the new cul-de-sac road, you create your new 100-foot frontage on that road. That's the change in frontage in a nutshell. It will encourage perhaps it will either lessen the rate of development, or it could encourage an increase in creating a roadway, subdivision roadways, which is a much more intense and destructive use of land. And if we do change it, that's when I think we trigger the change in the residential cluster bylaws so that we have more incentives to creating open space in these areas that would be opened up for development. If we don't change the frontage, or it gets defeated at town meeting, I would say that on the cluster bylaw, other than changing it from 10 to 5 acres, we probably wouldn't go forward with any change, but that's my pitch to the community. That's my pitch to you as to why we change it. We are a true outlier with our 50-foot frontage everywhere. And it's simply a choice. It's reevaluating a choice we made in 1969 to go from one type of development to another type of development, and which has been better and which is worse. So with that, I'll open up to any thoughts or comments somebody has about it. Or are you all saving it for the hearing? I really wish you wouldn't. I really wish I'd hear any opposition about it, or thoughts on it now, rather than waiting till the public hearing.
So the public hearing is this the 30th that keeps getting
The
referred?
public, that's just a forum to roll these out to the public and hopefully get some feedback. But
So what's the time on that and where?
That's going to be the 30th at Wilcott Commons.
At 7:30?
I don't know, Cassandra, is it 6:30 or 7?
Let me double check what time I had that room reserved for.
Our public hearing I'm referring to is our Section 5 hearing, where, again, we're not going to be a gatekeeper unless we collectively as a board decide we don't want to present something at all. And I don't want us to really be the deciders of this, but we'll make our recommendation. And yeah, I'm understanding that it very much be the possibility that I'm going up there as chair of the planning board and presenting these articles, and the recommendation of the board's going to be against it, and that's fine. That's fine. Again, my interest here is to let the community as a whole, as much as town meeting as the whole, make these decisions rather than just the 5 of us or the 10 of us counting the select board. So,
I have the
but in terms of comments here, I'd rather you tell me something now or tell me something on the 30th before dropping it on me on the 9th, which apparently is what Clark's going to do. So, and which has happened in the past. I mean, I'll be prepared for it, but I'd rather hear from you guys now about what you think about this.
Tom, I would
Yeah.
say that the discussion, for me at least, actually went backwards a bit. I was feeling sort of as if I understood what your objective was, but now I'm wondering again what your objective is.
My objective.
Let me just finish.
Yeah.
Know what you are trying to avoid, which is gigantic properties on gigantic pieces of land. I get that. In the 2 other categories, I can understand that you want to also limit scale, but it doesn't feel as, let's just say maybe the problems are more present in those 2 smaller land categories than the 3rd one. The 3rd one, if somebody has look what happened on Forest Avenue. Somebody bought 3 properties and they built a gigantic compound. We can't stop that. So I guess I'm wondering how this is going to.
Are you using my Forest Ave example?
Am I using what?
Are you using my Forest Ave example that I gave a little while ago, or something different?
The one that's up at the top of Forest Avenue, just before you go over the hill.
Oh,
Down.
that might be a different one.
Okay, so, well, you should drive by and see what it's like. It really is. It's a 3-lot compound. They just bought the
Okay,
houses,
okay.
torn down and made a, I don't know what the square footage is for the lots.
Well, that's, Forest Ave is mostly RB, I think, and.
Okay,
and,
so, but your objective is to dissuade somebody from putting a large house on a large lot. I think that
No,
is.
don't confuse the FAR with this. The objective here is, number one, why is Cohasset an outlier in zoning so much?
But
number two, in a given piece of land, I understand why the town made the change in 1969. I wasn't there, there's nobody around who's there, but you can reasonably come up with why they did this in 69 and why they changed it. And they were starting to face a lot of cul-de-sac subdivisions like my own street. So the question is, on a given piece of land, and the example I had with this client who was the abutter, you had an area of land, and under our current zoning, he could develop 6 lots. And by the way, I don't know if all 6 have been built on, and they might be the same lots you're talking about, that 3 houses are on them. I don't know if all 6 lots got developed, but there were 6 lots that were put into that subdivision. Now, if you had 100-foot frontage, that's Residence B. So let's say you had 125-foot frontage instead of 50. And the property owner did not want to go to the cost of building a cul-de-sac, which are very expensive and a deterrent to development. There would be 3 lots instead of 6 lots. So part of this is a deterrent to overdeveloping a given open piece of land, because the 50-foot frontage allows you to squeeze in more lots, potentially, assuming you have all the.
But then why don't you just use the the frontage and the setbacks as the mechanism rather than using FAR? That's
You're confusing 2 different things. The FAR is a different issue altogether. Well, overall, what I'm presenting to the community is this. At the end of World War II, we were a community of 4,000 some odd people. We're now 8,000. Took us a while to get there, but there was a big spurt in the 60s and there was a big spurt in the last 20 years. The town's answer to the spurt in the 60s was to take away the subdivisions, basically, by encouraging and allowing pork chop lots to develop rear land, back land in a less intensive way than a subdivision requires. Looking at this now today, 50 years, 60 years later, are we okay with that pattern of development that has now kicked us over a population of 8,000 people? And do we want to slow development further by making it more costly to develop? If you want to develop 6 lots on a given piece of land, and this would increase the frontage and reduce that number, to develop the 6, you'd have to go to the expense of putting in a roadway. That's a deterrent today because of the expense of it.
The point.
Or do you don't care and let what's happened happen to the community right now? We changed the common driveway thing so we can't have too many houses built off a common driveway. That's just it. Which development pattern going forward is better right now? Perhaps encouraging subdivisions and a more intensive use of a given piece of land, or are we going to deter development by reducing the number of lots that could be developed in a given piece of land? Or do we just stay with the status quo and, the horse is long out of the barn? Cohasset's not going to get that much bigger argument. I mean, I've seen growth projections for Cohasset anywhere from 9,000 to 12,000 people, depending on who you asked and when they were.
Well,
And no, and so for then, you know, the population growth of the town, since we insist on keeping a standalone school system rather than regionalizing, and nobody wants to regionalize with us anyway, is that gets very expensive. We all know that. The development is not so much from a planning and zoning or, you know, how many houses are on a given piece of land. It's what are those houses going to generate? Well, they're going to generate the need for more services. They're going to generate the need for more school space. And are we okay with that? Are we okay becoming a community of 9,000, 12,000 people and paying for all the
But you know,
infrastructure that goes with that? I
we
don't
haven't-
care.
We haven't had a public conversation about that.
That's what I'm trying to do here.
No, but you shouldn't try to regulate first and without an opinion. I mean, as a planner, that's just not your job.
Oh, God almighty, don't tell me what a planner does and doesn't do, okay?
But
The changes, look, if we keep the zoning the way it is, so be it. And we will have pork chop lots, we will have people developing backland with each having a long skinny individual driveway coming out to a road. Okay. And that's going to generate, we might get to the 9,000 population build out scenario. My idea might bring us to 12, it might all backfire. But I also know that developing cul-de-sacs and subdivisions today is an expensive proposition, and it is a deterrent. So the question is, does the town care how much bigger it gets? And if it doesn't care, you know, it could be an argument to just leave the status quo, and I'm fine with that's what the community decides, but it needs to be revisited. It is a choice we made 60 years ago, and things are different than 60 years ago. And the argument isn't complicated. The argument is not complicated, and our zoning always comes first.
You don't need to say anymore. You've
All right.
made your case.
All
Do you want us to vote on this? What do you want us to do?
I want to know what you think about it, one way or the other. Do you want to even go forward with the change? And if you do, what do you want the numbers to be? Here's the proposal right in front of you. And this is bringing us into line what suburbs do. Again, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm reasonably, you know, I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I have a reasonable guess at what will happen and why the change was made in '69. And we've developed in a certain way. Other towns have developed in a different way. Norwell, Situate, Hingham, we can look at our neighbors. They have more cul-de-sacs than we do because they have frontages more like this. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? That's all I want the community to think about.
Well, that's a question of educating the community. It's not, it's not.
It's not rocket science either, Amy. Don't make it rocket science. It's a very simple concept of how we have developed. We made a significant change a long time ago.
I know, but don't keep repeating what you're saying. I understand what you're saying.
All right.
And what I'm saying, I don't think you should legislate something like this before you actually investigate it and really understand whether or not what you're proposing is a better alternative.
I'm not I just told you what I'm suggesting. That is, whether it's better or not is a lot of speculation, and anybody studying this would be the same thing, because we don't know how a given property owner will react to this kind of bylaw. We don't have these many large tracts of property left to begin with. The Forest Ave example is a pretty significant example of something we might have left. And again, our current zoning yielded 6 lots. This change would make it 3 unless they put in a roadway. It would made it 4 with our new common driveway limitations, if we did it by common driveway rather than putting in a subdivision road. That's possible too.
Well, we basically are about ready to lose a quorum. So I think.
All right, you know what, well, whatever, you guys keep having it, all right. All right, we'll meet next week. We'll just deal with this. We'll, I guess, land alteration, I don't, I haven't heard anybody make any other changes. So I don't think it's too far from gone, but we'll start with that. We'll start with Carolyn's thing and we'll batter this around. And I'm not going to call Clark. I probably will call Clark, but somebody else call Clark and tell him he needs to engage in this, okay? Not engage in it by sniping at me at the public hearing, at town meeting, which he
Well,
will do
that's
anyway,
something
but
that we should be able to discuss as a board and if you can settle the situation with Clark and how he feels about it,
Well-
and then ask him not to allow the issue to come to the floor and have the public vote on it and not erode the discussion of that particular bylaw. That's what you have to be able to do.
yeah, I expect him to get up at town meeting or any one of you to get up at town meeting if you have a strong opinion on any of these. I don't care about that. I don't want to be blindsided by it. And I think as a member of the board, he owes it to participate here. Just because he doesn't like that it's being proposed isn't an excuse not to be here. So I'm going to speak to him about it. I'm only asking you to help me speak to him about it to make sure that he participates rather than just sits, goes off to the side and waits till the last minute to oppose it. I expect his opposition to both of these things. But I just think I'm disappointed. I couldn't see with my screen share that he wasn't here again. It's disappointing to me. So, I'll speak to him, but I'm just asking your help to speak to him. That's all.
Well, tell him other members of the board want to hear what he raised when he raised it months ago, and he put forth examples about how these ratios were inadequate given what people want to do in certain residential districts of the town. And he even used select board members as an example. He said this select board person that lives in this zone couldn't do this type of change to their existing property under what you're proposing here.
Yeah.
So, and it is what it is. I mean, and I can hear people saying, this is an elegant solution, to a problem that doesn't exist. So
It is a problem that, I'll tell you, it's a problem that exists because we all see it. We all see much, much larger houses.
But we can't stop that, Tom.
Yes, we can stop that that's what zoning is all about. Zoning has setbacks, height limits, but there's ways that zoning constrains, to the gentleman who's going to get up and say, I have an unfettered right to do whatever I want under the Constitution of the United States. Well, newsflash, you don't, and you haven't for the last 240 years either. And that's what zoning is. And now we have an example, recent example, where we permitted under large home review a 10,000 square foot house. He meets the current bylaw. He does not exceed the 20% footprint. Awfully close, but it doesn't exceed it. But that is now we see a 9,000 square foot lot. That's on a big lot that maybe under the floor area ratio could support that. The 10,000 square foot one would be smaller than it is if this was applied, no doubt about it, but it'd still be a very big house. And the 9,000 square foot one, I got to look at the numbers, probably the same thing. It'll still be big because the lot is big. It just won't be as big. And in everything, we are seeing people pushing height limits to the limit. All the developments are going to the max of our height limits. They push setback limits. It's just a matter of time. Large home review came in the mid 2000s. It was another trendy thing that our master plan consultant, Judy Barrett, proposed for us to do. And the poster boy example was next door in Norwell. You watched it during construction, a small ranch house, and behind it was this behemoth of a house that was being built behind it. And then the ranch got torn down. And a lot of people don't want to see that happen in their communities. And we see people who come to our meetings who don't want to see that happen. So let the town vote on it. Again, it almost passed the last time it came to a vote. Let it pass. Let them decide. That's all I'm saying.
all right,
If
so
the town
before we
chooses-
adjourn, I need to know what we have scheduled for next week and
All
the
right, this
time
is
and
what
the
we're gonna
means,
do.
and then the 30th.
We're gonna meet, well, we will meet next Wednesday at 6:30. We will take in order finalization of land alteration, finalization of impact development, and finalization of FAR and frontage. Okay? Everything
Tom?
else is ready to go. I will have the feedback of the selectmen from the night before. The 30th is not a planning board formal meeting. It is like we did in the spring. A public forum to roll out these ideas, see what people think about them to the extent we get people. Of course, I would like you all to be there, to show the flag, to get everybody to see who you are. But it'll be just like the one that was done in the spring. If these continue to all go to town meeting, I will probably do the same thing I did, is put a little video out and, you know, educate people as much as possible. I realize I'm not going to fully educate everybody by town meeting. On the October 9th, we have to have our formal hearings on these 10 articles. It might not be done in one night. And we will make our recommendations, yay or nay. They'll go forward, but they may go forward with a 5-0 vote in favor, like the last time. They may go favor 4-1, 3-2. They may be not recommended by 2-3 or 1-4. It may be all of you against me. I'm
Okay, so we know what's gonna happen, so can we please make a motion? Can I make a motion to adjourn?
Yes,
could
yes,
I
but
just-
you got the agenda for next week, okay? We'll deal with the 4 articles that we still need to.
Carolyn wants to say something.
I just have one thing we have to work out before you adjourn.
Yeah.
Cassandra.
Yes.
You've submitted the legal ad for the public hearing for October 9th. When is the first ad supposed to hit the paper? Because it should hit no later than September 25th.
That sounds correct to me, but it's the 2 weeks before then.
Okay, so if the
Yes, the
in
25th.
theory, if the ad hits on September 25th, people are going to be looking to your website or are going to be looking to the town clerk's office for the full text of these zoning amendments, which are not yet ready because you will be meeting the night of the 25th to decide on some of these. Is it possible to meet on Monday, the 23rd instead?
Let me look at that date.
We're asking you to do some updates. You have to be ready for that.
I know.
It is possible to meet the evening of Monday. This upcoming Monday.
Right. Everybody good with that?
I can't be there, Tom, I'm sorry.
How long is the meeting?
Are you saying October 25th?
No, September 23rd.
September 23rd?
Monday night,
Monday.
this Monday.
No, I won't be. I'm out of the country.
Well, I understand what we have to do for the public hearing. But we do have the flexibility still to change things even during that public hearing, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
You do, but there are still, like a couple of these are still just in discussion form. And even the development impact, I can do my best to fill in some blanks, but if you were going to set some parameters around it, if we're simply going to say that the development impact bylaw just applies to any use that requires a special permit or a site plan review,
All right.
I'm going to take all that other criteria of thresholds of parking spaces or et cetera, just take it all out. In which case that one is done.
Yeah.
But
I knew this was gonna happen.
well, the other
No,
thought.
I knew, I'm not saying that as a criticism, it's just that the time frame and meeting during the summer and all of this, everything has to happen so far ahead of town meeting. It's frustrating, that's all.
Well,
The
respectfully,
alternative.
the other thought is you could still schedule another planning board hearing, not that you necessarily want to do this, but you could do it sometime the week of, I think October 14th is a holiday, but you could
Well-
advertise a hearing for the, the 15th or the 16th for any bylaws that are not yet ready, or any amendments that the board is not ready.
Or we could just start it on the 16th and not do the 9th.
Except that Cassandra would have to see if she can pull back the ad.
I
or
think
keep it to the 16th.
Chris had also, the last I had spoken to him, he had expressed that it was going to be better to do the hearing sooner rather than later. And when I had proposed that it start on the 16th, he had expressed a recommendation to do it sooner, which is why it was changed to the 9th. And yes, I would have to, I did receive notice from the newspaper that I could make edits to the ad up until Friday.
Right, well, then do this. Do what Carolyn suggests of having a second hearing scheduled for the 16th to deal with, and Carolyn, if you could give Cassandra the appropriate wording to deal with whatever we might not have cleaned up yet.
All right, Cassandra, I'll be in touch tomorrow.
And
It's
I
just-
apologize for this. Again, tried my best to have this started earlier, but.
Tom, I don't see why we have to meet next week, Monday or Wednesday, if we can't accomplish what we want to accomplish now before we adjourn. I'm not hearing any opposition to what you put forth. Persons that may be inclined to oppose are not here to voice on that. If you want to get a vote from us now, and then you have an opportunity, or you can take the opportunity to reach out.
Tonight doesn't require a vote. It requires just finalization of the text and the objectives. So.
I don't see any problem with what you've put forth.
Okay,
as they're
fine,
currently
fine.
presented.
Then our discussion next week may be very short on those. I think that we have to deal with the mitigation one next week, and that if that's the only one we're dealing with, it's fine. I think the land alteration, personally, is done. Personally, but again, I'm not sure about where I stand with getting feedback from people. And Carolyn said a small edit needs to be made to the FAR one for a clarification point. That's fine. We don't have to discuss some of these if we're going to then just roll them out and see what the public thinks about them. And the real votes and the final decisions will be at our public hearing, on our Section 5 hearings. And, I may sit here and say, if 4 of you are opposed to some of these, do we make the strategic decision to go forward with that anyway? Again, I'd rather see the community as a whole make these decisions than 5 of us or 10 of us make these decisions,
And they can be framed like that.
Okay.
And so
and then I'll
let's,
have feedback from how the select board thinks in their current thinking. Again, they've been supportive to this point, but now we're getting to the devil is always in the details. And before our public hearing, I'm also going to meet with the zoning board before our Section 5 hearing. So, yeah, let's plan on Wednesday. It could be as many of the 4 we just discussed that are going to be discussed, but it could be as simple as just dealing with the development impact one. Okay? Everybody seems to be able to make it next Wednesday rather than Monday, so we'll do that. And Cassandra and Carolyn, if you could just work out how to schedule the second public hearing if is necessary for the 16th.
Okay.
And just for clarification, because it sounded like some folks had conflicting issues next week, are we going to have a quorum for Wednesday?
I think the conflicts were Monday.
Yeah.
What I heard. Wednesday, I wasn't hearing any.
Yeah, we'll work on that if there's, and I, again, speak to Clark about making sure we have a quorum at least, so.
And Cassandra, the 30th is at 7 p.m. at Wilcott or 6:30?
Apologies, I tried to say the time earlier. It was 6:30.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you all. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, so moved. Second.
All right, alphabetical roll call, Tom Callahan, aye.
Amy Glassmeyer, aye.
Kevin Heine, aye.
Deirdre Hobson, I. Thank you, Tom.
David Whitfish, aye.
Thank you all for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I appreciate it more than you think, and that I might let on sometimes. I apologize for that, but.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thanks,
See you
Tom.
next
Good
meeting.
night, everyone. Good
Bye-bye.
night.
I
Night.
Thank you, Caroline.